Trading Addicts. This is Jeff Kohler, aka The Option Addict, from over at www.tradingaddicts.com. Here with another weekly watch list. Let's start off with a little bit of market analysis. The indices all the way across the board, new yearly highs. What else can you say? I tried to sniff out a little bit of weakness last week, and that's what it looked like it was. And that started off pretty good with that breakdown out of that range, but after the S&P broke so hard, right down to that max pain level that we'd been talking about in some of our sessions, the 980 area, that ended up being an optimal point to get into any swing long positions, and from there on, the market just started to rip higher. So we're in official breakout mode. The sell signals that we saw the Dow and the Nasdaq go into about 2 weeks ago have since gone back into buy signals. I mean, everything looks good across the board. The only thing that I'm really sniffing out here right now is the relative strength that used to exist with China over the U.S. has since changed. That relative strength is now turning and transitioning into relative weakness. So with the S&P trading at new yearly highs, if you look at the FXI, it's fallen pretty darn short. And if you look here at this little, could be a potential head and shoulders pattern, but if you do a relative strength comparison, you'll notice that trend line that the FXI had in comparison with the S&P or the spiders has now broken down, and we're seeing China stocks start to be the relative weakness candidate here, which I found pretty interesting. That's the one thing I picked on up here this week, and you'll see a couple of China stocks in the list this week based on this transition from relative strength to relative weakness, where China has led, it is now lagging. And I think that's going to be an important thing to pick up on in the days and weeks to come. But before I get too far in my head of myself, let me go ahead and throw out a couple of dips, rips, breakouts, breakdowns, and $10 darlings out your way. Check this out.
The champ is here! 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 The champ is here!
And other than that, folks, I want to get into a little bit of price patterns. The one thing that I'm watching here pretty carefully, and I kicked myself in the face for missing this movement here earlier this week, is the move in crude oil. Using USO, the trend line that's been intact over the last year, I missed this dip buying opportunity down here, USO near 35. Since then, prices have run back up to upper resistance, and I think crude oil is at a pretty important point now, just by using the USO here, where prices have consolidated. You know, everybody's been worried about crude not being able to have taken out its June highs, and I don't know if a breakout here of this pattern means that crude starts to go for another leg higher. You know, 75 is kind of that magical area everybody's talking about. Well, if crude gets above 75, it goes to 80, 85, and I think this might be that early signal to watch for this week to see if that happens. You know, I've been crazy. I've been watching the energy equities for so long here, thinking they need to play a little bit of catch-up because they're the only group in terms of bullish percent that is not extremely overbought. I don't wonder if there's going to be a big move yet in the energy patch. I think you got to keep a close eye on it. But aside from that, I got stuff that's all over the map here today. I got reversal patterns. I got continuation patterns. Where do you want to go? First off, I don't know if you've been noticing the movement in paper stocks, but I like this ticker symbol WPP. And it's a relatively liquid instrument. But what I do like here, and I'll just zoom in here just recently, is this particular setup. Now, we had a long position in Boise and took some pretty good gains in that, and I think Boise is a pretty good illustration of how some of these paper stocks have been doing. You see Boise just ripping over the last couple of weeks. Well, I'm looking over at WPP to play some catch-up here. So if you're looking for a reasonably priced equity, some good volume, the stock kind of fell off of its highs intraday, but it's still a pretty decent price where I think it ought to run to at least 10 or 11. So WPP, make note of that. As we talked about crude oil just a minute ago too, I'm pretty crazy about this WTI. You know, as we get into hurricane season and whatnot, looking for somebody with a little net gas, a little crude oil exposure, somebody that's got some business down on there in the Gulf. I like this flag breakout in WTI. I like the uptick in volume over the last couple of days. I really like the move above the 200-day moving average, so I went out and bought me a big grundle of shares. And I think you got to pay pretty close attention to this one. Stop maybe down here in the upper 9 region, but I do like this as a play heading out over the next couple of weeks. Let's start looking at China. You can apply most of this pattern analysis to about anything you look at in China right now, but I'm looking at NetEase, which has been one of those that I've traded to the upside in the past. But it's looking like maybe a sell the rip opportunity, or even better, maybe a potential head and shoulders pattern. You know, not a great looking one, but not really participating in this move higher. I'd let it stop going up first. Maybe you anticipate the right shoulder of a head and shoulders pattern here before it starts to break down. Take a look at CHL also for a pretty similar pattern, and you can go across most of these stocks, but for such a great day in equities on Friday, here's a stock that gapped down and really stayed down all day. And it's ugly, but you'll see that you got a shoulder here, head, shoulder, breakdown. And I'd only stay in this for a couple of points, but CHU, CHL, CHA, anything China, I'd really detest right here. So triangles. We talked about the Caribou Coffee move and what's been going on with some of these coffee stocks in general. Keep an eye on PEET, P-E-E-T. For what the pattern that's dwelling here. You don't have a whole lot of volume taking place yet, but if volume starts to uptick, especially into a breakout, I think you got to look to buy some calls or even buy some stock on this one. This pattern looks pretty good. Let's also go to something that I like to the downside. So we spent a lot of time talking about how the material sector was the first group to break down, to crack. Out of all the bullish percents and all the sectors out there, basic materials was the first one to go into bull correction. So ATI, one of the weakest stocks in that group, descending triangle with prices right here around 30 is where I love it. If we can see this thing start to roll over into next week, I don't want to let it go too much higher. I don't want to let it take out about 30, 30 and a half. But if it can start to roll lower from here, I think this is a perfect example to take advantage of that weakness going on in the material sector. If you're looking for a weak group, you can also look at defense names. I've got a position going on in defense myself right now. What I'm looking at is this Lockheed Martin, same thing, stock that really hasn't participated much to the upside. Almost like a descending triangle right through here, having a hard time going up. I'm looking for a breakdown maybe later this week, but something to definitely have on your radar into weakness. All right, next is CPSI. And take a look at this one. I know it comes up at the top of a trend here, but still, looking for a potential breakout. Inverse head and shoulders pattern up here at the top of this trend. Pretty decent volume on that increase, but I think once it gets north of volume, probably gets going here a little bit. So I like this one. Price target would be about a 7-point move over about a couple months worth of time. So keep an eye on this name. Also, if you're looking for continuation patterns, look no further than Netflix. I like the way that this little bad boy has been kind of forming into a symmetrical triangle, pennant, whatever you want to call it. Look for a breakout here in Netflix. You might see another pullback first before that happens, but either way, I love it down at 43, 44, but into a breakout, I could also buy it there. A couple more. Ticker symbol BR. I like this little financial name, the way it's flagging. And I like that volume on Friday. Not a huge increase yet, but after a big run-up, just been paused. Volume starting to tick up. There's been a lot of accumulation up here in the 20s. So I like this name, especially if it starts to turn higher on Monday. CSFG. This is one of the stocks that has some of the most short interest out there, coupled with the weak China story, the consolidation pattern, the head and shoulders up through here, a reversal pattern, watch for a breakdown. This is a name that I also like to the downside. And last but not least, already taken a position here, just in full disclosure, but Beezer. Take a look at the 1 month chart, or the 1 year chart. Know where the stock is at in terms of resistance. Big reversal pattern, high short interest. Big volume on Friday there. Biggest volume we've seen in a while without a whole lot of price movement. So nice little quiet accumulation. If it gets north of about let's call it 420, I think this thing starts to rip higher. So that's all I got this week, folks. Again, I like the idea for stocks to go higher here. Looking to buy dips, looking to play the small cap stocks. That's been a pretty easy sport as of late, so I think we ought to continue where the easy money goes. But I also want you to keep an eye on that relative weakness going on in China. Continue to watch financials. We got long Citigroup into that breakout last week, but I think you got to continue to watch financial names. The BKX, which I should have talked about earlier, after having been on a tremendous run, that same run we talked about a couple weeks back when the BKX broke above its 200-day for the first time in like 2 years. After a nice little consolidation pattern, the banks are ripping higher, so I think you also got to be long financials through here. They're ready for another leg. So any financial you've seen that's starting to do something like Citigroup did, starting to consolidate, starting to break out, that's the one you want to look for. That's the one you want to own. So with that, I'll go ahead and close off on that note. This has been The Option Addict. That's been my watch list. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.
It's not about money. It's about sending a message.